Welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced this morning that the House is going to begin drafting articles of impeachment. This as Americans are still fiercely divided over impeachment. Former Vice President Joe Biden gets in a testy exchange with an audience member during an Iowa town hall. At one point, Biden even seems to take a jab at the man's weight. A bomb threat shook New York City today. Thousands of high school students were forced to evacuate, but were allowed to return after the threat was cleared. Chinese tech giant Huawei is accused of retaliating against a former employee. Some speculate the company's attack comes after the employee planned to expose its violation of U.S. sanctions on Iran. The White House held its annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony today. Situated south of the White House, the tree stands at 30 feet tall. Lawmakers and Americans remain divided after this morning's announcement that the House will begin drafting articles of impeachment.
Tourists from across the country visiting Capitol Hill on Thursday expressed their opinions on the divisive proceedings.
Well, I think the government needs to be kept honest at all times, and if there's something to investigate, they might as well investigate it. But
some say the president is in the wrong.
I think the evidence is very clear that he put his own personal interests before the interests of our country.
But others aren't convinced.
I think it's a waste of money, and I think all of them should be impeached.
While some say the investigation has come at a bad time.
It's Christmas time. He's going to be, we have an election next year. Why don't they wait, let the voters speak?
Congressmen from both parties are similarly at odds. Some say time is of the essence.
If we do not act to hold him in check now, President Trump will almost certainly try again to solicit interference in the election for his personal political gain.
But others fear partisan impeachment.
This morning I listened to Speaker Pelosi give us historical references. The one that she skipped was Alexander Hamilton when he wrote, "There will always be the greatest danger that the decision to use the impeachment power would be driven by partisan animosity instead of real demonstrations of innocence or guilt."
If the House passes the articles of impeachment as expected, that would lead to a trial in the Senate. The Senate would decide whether to convict Trump and remove him from office. But Republicans control the Senate and have shown little support for the president's removal.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today slammed a reporter who asked if she hated President Trump during a press conference.
Do you hate the president, Madam Speaker?
As Pelosi left the podium after her remarks, a reporter asked from the audience if she hated President Trump. She vehemently denied what she called the accusation.
Because
I don't hate anybody.
Representative
I was raised in a Catholic house. We don't hate anybody, not anybody in the world.
She said President Trump was a coward and cruel for not addressing gun violence, protections for dreamer immigrants, and climate change, but added those issues were up to voters to decide in next year's election.
This is about the Constitution of the United States and the facts that lead to the president's violation of his oath of office.
She said she resented that word being used to address her.
So don't mess with me when it comes to words like that.
Pelosi has received backlash following her announcement Thursday that the House is set to proceed with impeaching President Trump.
Former Vice President Joe Biden got into a testy exchange with an audience member during an Iowa town hall today. He called the man a liar for claiming Biden sent his son to work for a Ukrainian natural gas company.
But you, on the other hand, sent your son over there to get a job and work for a gas company that he had no experience with gas or nothing, in order to get access for the president. So you're selling access to the president just like he was.
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that? No one has proved that? No.
Joe Biden's son, Hunter, was paid to be on the board of a Ukrainian gas company while his father was vice president and the point person for Ukraine. Hunter Biden resigned from the board earlier this year. He told ABC that he likely got the job because of his last name, but said that there was nothing unethical about it. President Trump has accused Joe Biden of pressuring Ukraine to fire its top prosecutor for investigating the gas company. Biden did threaten to withhold $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees if he wasn't fired, but denies it was to protect his son.
Look, the reason I'm running is because I've been around a long time and I know more than most people know. And I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape on, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do. Let's take an IQ test, okay? Number one. Number two, no one has said my son has done anything wrong, and I did not on any occasion. And no one has ever said it. Not one.
The man tells Biden he saw it on MSNBC, to which Biden responds that he didn't.
Any other questions?
Yeah, all right. I'm not voting for you.
Well, I knew you were, man. You think I thought you'd stand up and vote for me? You're too old to vote for me.
Ukraine has become a campaign issue for Biden as well as an issue for Trump. It is at the center of the impeachment inquiry, which stemmed from a July call Trump had with Ukraine's president. On the call, Trump asked the president to investigate Biden's influence in the prosecutor's firing and to see if there was any corruption involved. Ukraine's president has said he didn't feel any pressure to open the investigation.
The State Department said today it believes over 1,000 protesters could have been killed by the Iranian regime. That's up from previous estimates of several hundred.
The U.S. Special Representative for Iran said that in addition to those killed, thousands have been injured since the protests began on November 15th.
It appears the regime could have murdered over 1,000 Iranian citizens since the protests began.
Among those killed, he said at least a dozen are children. Iranian leaders have not given an official death toll. Amnesty International said on Monday that it had documented the deaths of at least 208 protesters. This makes the protest the bloodiest since the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
We have received reports from family members of victims who tried to recover the bodies. The authorities demanded that the families first pay the cost of the bullets they used.
The Trump administration has implemented a maximum pressure campaign to force Iran to give up its nuclear weapons program and to stop funding terrorism. The U.S. has sanctioned Iranian oil and has imposed economic penalties on any country who buys it. The protest started after the Iranian regime increased gas prices by as much as 300% and started rationing it. Tehran's clerical rulers have blamed thugs linked to its opponents in exile and the country's main foreign adversaries, the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia, for the unrest.
I would also just point out none of these protests are against the United States. This is sort of a regular canard that I hear, that these sanctions are going to unify the Iranian people.
In addition to those killed and injured, Hook said over 7,000 Iranian citizens have been arrested. The U.S. is now moving to sanction 2 prisons where it says many of the protesters are being detained.
Today, Secretary Pompeo has determined these entities meet the criteria for gross human rights violations.
A top Pentagon official told senators on Thursday that the U.S. is considering sending more troops to the Middle East to counter Iranian aggression. Since May, an additional 14,000 U.S. troops have been sent to the region, as well as the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, Air Defense Forces, and aircraft.
President Trump said today the U.S. stands with the protesters. He hinted that the protests could have been avoided if at certain key times the Iranian leadership had made different decisions. And in New York, thousands of students were evacuated from a Brooklyn high school after it received an emailed bomb threat this morning. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the evacuation.
The NYPD surrounded Brooklyn Technical High School. A bomb threat led to the evacuation of staff and students around 8 in the morning. Outside, they told us they didn't know what was going on.
The word is we're going back in. The word is the kids are coming back in, but I don't know.
The NYPD announced the evacuation on Twitter and urged people to stay away, but around 11:30, the people were allowed back into the building. So the students are coming back. As you can see, they're on a single file line here, and they're coming back from Long Island University, which isn't too far away from here. We spoke to a father who said he was disappointed that the school didn't contact him directly. He said that he was online and found the story, and that's what prompted him to come here. NYPD Chief of Department Terrence Monahan said later they searched the building and didn't find anything. Monahan also said they're hoping to arrest the person that sent the email. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
More than 800,000 protesters in more than 100 cities across France are calling on the government to drop its pension reform plan. NTD's France correspondent David Vives has the story.
According to police, more than 800,000 protesters took to the streets in nationwide protests across France. Protesters hope to force President Emmanuel Macron to abandon plans to overhaul France's pension system, which they say would see them retiring later or facing reduced payouts.
The entire country is paralyzed. Most of the trains, buses and metros are cancelled. Most of the schools are closed, forcing many people to work at home.
Among the demonstrators, we can see firefighters, caretakers, and students who answered the call of the trade unions to strike. This protester works at a public hospital and traveled 100 miles to get to Paris.
It's very serious. There is a risk of lowering all pensions overall by claiming that we must make different systems homogeneous. The system can only work if you have confidence in those in charge of it, which is not the case at all.
For a few years now, I've been thinking that we don't get much for our pensions. They'll get later and later, and the amount will get smaller and smaller. Retired people today have a very bad deal.
While the Paris protests remain orderly as of 2 p.m., clashes between police and protesters erupted in Nantes, Rennes, and Bordeaux. The French government has announced it will make a public declaration in answer to the protests next week.
The President and First Lady lit the White House Christmas tree today.
It's an honor to be with everyone tonight and all across our land. Melania and I would like to wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. And now the First Lady will do the honors of lighting the National Christmas tree. So we'll count from 5 down to that very special number. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The tree is surrounded by 56 smaller trees featuring ornaments from every state, territory, and the District of Columbia. The 30-foot tree is decorated with 50,000 lights and 450 giant white star ornaments.
And at Christmas, we remember this eternal truth. Every person is a beloved child of God. As one grateful nation, we praise the joy of family, the blessings of freedom, and the miracle of Christmas. On behalf of Melania and our entire family, Merry Christmas, and God bless you all. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you.
And coming up, China's telecom giant Huawei is accused of using government power to retaliate against a former employee. More on what could have been behind the employee's detention after the break.
I have traveled all over the world to 50 countries now, and I have never seen a production any better than this anywhere.
It's absolutely out of this world.
It's blown away my expectations.
It was just a superior performance that truly could bridge the world through music and dance.
Startling and breathtaking. We haven't had quite an experience like that in all the years that I've lived here, so it was special for us.
I think that I learned more in this performance than I actually do in a whole week of school.
The beautiful costumes and people just float. The choreography is incredible, and the storyline, beautiful, beautiful.
It's so beautiful. I'm getting teary-eyed watching. It's very moving. You feel it. You're feeling the show.
It's like a mini vacation that transported me into another place, into another world, into another culture.
I came here tonight, I felt very dejected about the human race, about everything going on in this world. And during the performance, I just felt now there is hope for each of us individually, as well as for all of us collectively.
Shenyun was more breathtaking, more heart-wrenchingly beautiful, more amazing than I had expected. It's very difficult to put into words, actually. You just have to come see it.
Chinese telecom giant Huawei is facing public backlash in China after a former employee was wrongfully accused by the company of blackmail and detained for 8 months. But a China activist says the arrest might be Huawei's effort to cover up its violation of U.S. sanctions on Iran.
One former Huawei employee warned online, "Don't deal with the devil." Li Hongyuan learned this lesson the hard way. He worked for Huawei for 12 years. After he reported wrongdoing in his department to management, he found himself marginalized and later forced to leave the job. But it didn't end there. News broke this week that Li was wrongfully detained for 8 months. He was released this August. The case went viral and generated an angry response online. Chinese people are accusing Huawei of using the regime's power to retaliate against its employees.
It showed fully how public power can be used for private purposes in a totalitarian society.
But China human rights activist Yang Chanqing suspects the real reason for Li's arrest is his plan to report Huawei's violation of U.S.-Iran sanctions to the media.
The evidence for Huawei's sanction violation. They can't sentence him on these grounds, and of course they can't write it in the court files, but they can arrest him and then put another crime on him.
Yan said he was in contact with several former employees in 2018. He said they were involved in a labor dispute with Huawei and were very upset. 2 of them plan to report Huawei's sanction violation to Hong Kong media. Yan helped them schedule a meeting with reporters on a Sunday. The employees were arrested the Friday before. Yan said he didn't know their names, but that it's highly likely Li is one of them. In a notice of detention from one employee's wife, the arrest date is the same as Li's. Yan said in an online chat group, one of the 2 wrote that Huawei sales to Iran is an open secret in the company. The man said he had evidence to prove the sales. The chat app they use, WeChat, is known for working with the Chinese authorities to censor political discussions.
The important thing for the Chinese authorities is not to find him guilty. It's to reach an agreement with him so that he will keep silent on these sanction violation issues.
Li later received more than $10,000 in state compensation. The Trump administration has blacklisted Huawei for fear it could be used by the Chinese regime for spying. The U.S. also urges its allies to bar Huawei from their 5G networks. Reporting by Penny Zhou, NTD News.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Our investigative reporters at the Epoch Times have spent 18 months uncovering the biggest political scandal in modern history. We connected the dots around Spygate, the actions by Obama-era officials against Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Join me on Declassified as we bring you up-to-date developments on this unfolding scandal.
CEO of United Airlines is stepping down. The company announced Thursday that Oscar Munoz will leave his position as CEO to become the executive chair of the company. Munoz is best known for being the face of United during a 2017 public relations debacle when a passenger was dragged off an overbooked flight. United says Scott Kirby will take Munoz's place as CEO next spring. Kirby currently serves as the company's president. And Ford and McDonald say they are working together to reduce waste by creating auto parts from coffee.
Ford is turning McDonald's coffee waste into auto parts. The hope is to create lighter car parts such as headlamp housings that are more durable.
It's incredibly lightweight, and so it's replacing a very, very dense mineral material, almost like ground up rocks. So imagine the difference in lightweighting when you use this material instead.
The coffee chaff is replacing talc, a non-renewable resource harvested from earth, and makes the auto components lighter and more durable.
And the important part about the new material is that it has higher heat properties. So when these bulbs get hot, this component does not deform.
The recipe includes mixing coffee chaff, the dried skin on the bean that comes off during the roasting process, with plastic. So how did the idea come about?
I drink a lot of coffee, and I was walking through the lab one day with this perennial cup of coffee morning, noon, and night, and looked at it and said, oh my gosh, there must be waste here. And I was kind of making a joke. And the team went away and came back with the idea of using coffee chaff.
After that, the company reached out to McDonald's, which she says has a similar sustainability philosophy to Ford, and the two decided to team up. Ford is planning to use coffee chaff to make other vehicle parts as well.
Scientists have released the first data from a space probe flying so close to the sun that it's inside the star's upper atmosphere. The findings are reshaping our understanding of the violent solar winds that can hit electronics on Earth.
It's flying faster and closer to the sun than any other man-made object before it, a NASA experiment called the Parker Solar Probe. So close, in fact, that it's inside our star's upper atmosphere, what we call the corona, the hazy outermost edge you can usually see during a solar eclipse. And now, scientists have released the probe's first set of data from its flybys, and they say it's reshaping their understanding of some of the star's most elusive secrets, including how the sun's violence can affect electronics here on Earth. One big surprise, they say, was the finding of enormous spikes in the speed of what's called the solar wind. That's the constant stream of superheated particles ejected from the sun. Big bursts of it are known to disrupt things like communications satellites. The solar wind is also what causes aurora on our planet, like the northern lights. The scientists are comparing the spikes to rogue waves on an ocean. The Parker Solar Probe was launched last year and has so far come within about 15 million miles of the sun's surface. That might sound far away, but for reference, the scorching planet Mercury is over 2 times that distance. NASA plans to get the probe within a mere 4 million miles before its mission's expected to end in 2025.
Up next, French scientists have discovered a new solution for creating the controversial French delicacy foie gras. Known as fatty liver, the traditional process of fattening up ducks and geese has come under fire from animal welfare activists. See how chefs say the new version compares when we return. In France, scientists have come up with an alternative way to make foie gras so that the traditional delicacy can be marketed in other countries.
This little goose is only a couple of days old, but has a promising future for lovers of French delicacy, foie gras. Its literal translation from French is fatty liver. French scientists are developing a naturally fatty version that does not employ force feeding to appeal to countries where production methods are tightly regulated. Geese grower Valérie Fossery is the first farmer to produce this new type of foie gras by giving a single dose of serum containing natural bacteria to 2-day-old goslings.
Il reste ici sur place 6 mois. Donc déjà, il n'y aura pas de stress de déménagement. Et après, on enlève le stress, bien sûr, dû au gavage. Donc ça va changer beaucoup de choses au niveau de l'éthique.
Long scorned by animal welfare activists, the process of force-feeding geese and ducks to fatten up the liver has led to legislation banning foie gras in countries like the United Kingdom, Finland, and Poland. California and New York have also banned selling the delicacy. But French researcher Rémi Berslin said geese and duck livers can become naturally fatty through overfeeding by nature, where they store up energy during the migration season. Together with 2 other scientists, he founded the research company Aviwell to develop a process that stimulates geese to naturally build up fatty liver without having to thrust feeding tubes into the geese's throat. The process begins by identifying a combination of bacteria in a gosling's intestines that triggers the fat storage.
Ces combinaisons-là sont capables d'induire chez l'oison la programmation naturelle et parfaitement biologique du développement du gras dans le foie, qu'on appelle un foie naturellement gras, car non gavé.
Aviwell grew 600 geese when it launched its project last year. The company hopes to increase its production to 2,000 to 3,000 geese by 2020. A French chef has been creating dishes with Aviwell's foie gras in his restaurant, saying it is more subtle and has a nice density, and could be served cold or with little garnishing.
On a un produit qui est ferme, on a une très belle couleur, et c'est un produit que j'aime finalement amener dans son état le plus naturel possible, car il a une belle densité, il a un goût très subtil, et c'est surtout sa texture qui est remarquable.
It will also be more expensive. While traditional foie gras is sold for about $150 to $200 per pound, Aviwell's version could be sold for $500 per pound. This new foie gras will be aimed primarily to the European and US markets, but will also be found in France, where traditional foie gras is widely consumed.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.